They were told to pack their bags for the war, but they never came home. An entire English village vanished from the map, not from bombs, but from a broken promise. They told the villagers it would be temporary, evacuate for the war, they were told, and return home when it was over. In November 1943, the farmers and fishermen of Tyneham, on Dorset's Jurassic coast, left behind doors, fields, and a life rooted in generations. They expected to come back in months. They never did. Tyneham was a small coastal village where people lived close to the sea and the seasons. Children went to the village school. Families tended gardens on hills that looked out across the bay. Then the Ministry of Defense arrived with maps and orders. The ground was needed for military training for the coming invasion of Europe. Men were given 28 days to leave. Some packed what they could, some left in a hurry. One woman later wrote that she closed the door of her house and never turned the key again. During and after the war, the village became part of the Lulworth Ranges. Tanks, artillery, and exercises replaced daily life. The government had promised the residents they could return after the fighting ended. But decisions made in Whitehall and the demands of the Cold War turned that promise into silence. The houses decayed, roofs fell in, gardens were reclaimed by bramble and grass. The old school and church stood like monuments to a life that had been put on pause and never resumed. Over the decades, people campaigned, lobbied, and petitioned to come back. In some years, open days were allowed and former residents or their descendants would visit, walking cautiously down lanes that seemed uncluttered by time. But access was limited, and for the younger generations, Tyneham became a story they learned secondhand, a rumor of lost chimneys and a church with boarded windows. Tyneham is more than an abandoned village. It is a story about promises made in war and never kept in peace. It asks uncomfortable questions. How do nations balance security and justice? What is the price paid by people whose lives are treated as expendable for a greater strategic plan? Walking through Tyneham today, you see cracked sidewalks, moss on stone walls, the old schoolroom still holding echoes of children's lessons. The gravestones in the small churchyard are quiet testimony to families put adrift. The land is used for training, but memory remains. Every time the public is allowed in, visitors notice small things: a photograph left in a window, a child's toy half buried in bracken, proof that human lives were interrupted, not erased. That interruption became permanent for Tyneham's families. The last person who remembered life before the evacuation carried the village's story with them to the grave, and with each generation the claim to return faded. Yet Tyneham draws people now precisely because it is a place where time stopped, a small, living museum of a promise and a loss. When you stand outside the empty doors and look across the bay, it's impossible not to imagine the life that once was. Baking bread, bell chimes on Sunday, the smell of sea salt. The British countryside still hides these pockets of history, quiet, uncanny, and heartbreaking. Tyneham reminds us that even today, history is not merely what we read about. It is where people lived, loved, and were asked to leave.